intentionality.
Yeah.
And could you say a few words about
Yeah.
the choice of the word desire and how compare it with other possible choices you could have had?
Yeah. Well, I'm a German romantic. This needs to be emphasized in a way. No, but to be serious, I am using intentionality as well. So I would say desire is my way of strengthening certain aspects of that, and also to give this a twist which can really be identified with by anybody who knows desire, because intentionality is still, and I mean this is why others might prefer that, it's still somehow neutral, scientific sounding in a way. And I mean, where did it come from? The phenomenological project is maybe it's still somehow in the Cartesian setup. So I feel desire as kind of breaking down borders. Thinking of, like the title of my book is like matter as desire. To me, changes the face of the world. Actually, that's important. Yeah, that's probably part of the answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Intentionality would have been one of the words I could have grasped in Danish as well, actually.
It has been used a few times today.
Yeah. No.
Can we supplement just a short as to
yeah.
intentionality? It can be considered in a Cartesian way, as you mentioned, as intentionality of consciousness. But it can also be considered in a more phenomenological way with reference to Merleau-Ponty as a bodily intentionality, which he calls operative intentionality as distincting from intentionality of the act. You have a specific act that contains intentionality of some sort, you are up to something, and then you have the bodily operative intentionality which sort of anchors you in the world, having something with it is about. So it's not quite as neutral at that level, because it's fueled with needs of the body and desire. So that would be another answer to the question on intentionality.
Yeah. I mean, I'm totally not against using it. It's just my way of stressing this, let's say, the existential, emotional side of the whole project. Why I use this word. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you again. It's about, I think it's very interesting, your theory. But when I'm working with children, I often see children as self-destructive pattern.
So first, I'd say that that being an organism, which we all are and kids are, and being creating ourselves as meaningful selves in this world is at the same time an impulse to more individualization and to more connection. This goes hand in hand, and so self-destructiveness and destroying connections also go hand in hand in a way. I sometimes I all this what I try to explain today I subsumed under the idea of aliveness, of being more alive and feeling more alive as a project, as a desire of being in this world. And my very modest pedagogical stance is that if you can allow others their aliveness, things tend to settle from them, from out of themselves. because we, as being parts of this whole, we have the impulses of this whole to be productive if we only allow them. But I mean, this can mean lots of patience, unless the, let's say, the drive, the desire for to be fertile kicks in. I mean, it's not something you can use. My answer is just a kind of reframing of this in my. I mean, I have been interested a lot in those disturbances which blur the sense of self and other, or which make others an absolute requirement for the self to function. So I think it's very, very many pathological happenings have to do with blocking the self to unfold through others, but not in this absolute way of using others or living only through others. So it's a very, in a way, it's a very natural, but also very sensitive balance, but which to my eyes just comes about if we grant the space. But I mean, it might be very, very, very hard to if somebody is really has really lost or if somebody is so traumatized that he learned that being self is equal to being immediately destroyed, then I think it can be very difficult to nourish that trust in the desire of the whole to be born through my own actions, actually.
Can I add something? When you talk about desire, from own experience, from myself and also from my clients, is that desire, I don't think you can talk about desire as one thing. It changes by age to what it means to you and what it does to you. You can have desire, the basic desire for existing change forms from age to age. I think my desire when I was 5 on 16 and 22 or 35 and now 83 are very, very different. I mean, it feels very different and requires a very different relationship to the world. Being in the world in a very different way. So my desire to be with others has changed over time. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I at my modestly old age, I can also already partly witness what you're saying.
Some desire is when you, yeah.
Whereas I can't wait.
I can't wait, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Hanne, I would like to ask you something. You were rather upset about the self-regulation stuff. I would like to ask you, how do you help a person with a phobic anxiety?
To what?
With a phobic
Phobic?
anxiety. How do you help a person?
I don't know. I have no recipe. It depends on what's happening between us. I mean, I don't see the diagnosis. That's maybe what brings her or him to me. We will have to examine together what it means. I don't think there's one way of looking at it. My client will experience it one way and will just tell me what it is like to be her. And as I probably have to, I'm not there to fix it. I'm there to help her to be aware of how is it for her and what just started and what does it do to her. And my experience is that the more awareness we bring to that painful situation, the more we can just make it something we have together. It can be very helpful. I won't say it disappears, but it changes the quality. That's my experience. So I have no recipe for you.
Can I, well, I was going to ask you, can I ask you something, but I mean, I could also ask you, so can I just utter, sorry.
Just ask each other questions as well.
Well, I'll have a question for all of us. When you said, well, I have no idea, it depends on what is, what will be surfacing among us. So I was thinking, isn't one of the important roles, or maybe the most important role in this setting with a therapist, that, or with any second person, that this second person just allows as much self as there is to emerge? Isn't that crucial? Just being there, witnessing it, welcoming it, and not judging it for being whatever, not adequate. And in this respect, holding this space, it's like generating or enacting an other which lends itself to be in connection with, because it doesn't withdraw by saying, no, this is you're too sick, I just can't deal with you, or whatever. And isn't that the same? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but isn't that the same role as all other beings have, actually, who are there offering, and just to finish, offering a space of aliveness to which you can connect being yourself. Isn't this a proxy for, let's say, the whole fertile web? I mean, it's not a question to use particularly, it's a kind of thinking aloud here. Now I have the opportunity to ask therapists what I never could ask my therapist.
I'm a professional other. That means I'm not somebody else. I'm a professional other.
Yes.
And which means that I have to make myself available in a very special way, and I know what's going on. I know the diagnosis, and I know but for her, so I'm not. How can I explain this? The difference between just being friend and open and being related. I have a profession, and I know what to emphasize, to highlight, and to make the foreground instead of the background. I think that's my profession. I can do that. I can emphasize certain responses from her instead of others. This is my choice, which I do from a professional viewpoint.
I was relating more to the generalization you made, thinking that you mentioned you were a romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that now, because I don't think it's so simple with the relation between people that we can say that what it matters of in our relation in general is to let the other be as full as the other can be, because then you take away some of the other aspects of the dirty nature of human beings. And the desire is not just a desire for letting the other one grow, it has also to do with growing yourself. And sometimes that has a price for another person, and so I think it's much more complex than to just have this approach. But it would, coincidence, it would be this pretty good picture of a romantic approach to it, which I don't think we should. I think it's too naive. Actually.
Yeah. No, I immediately got it. That when you said now I saw you're a romantic because that it was too simple.
Yeah.
I really saw the connection. But I stopped that here. But I'd say I didn't say it like this. So I didn't say relationships are about this. I said isn't that an occasion to open a relationship, which is like this. But this might be another discussion. But I like this just to take home. I like this because romanticism has a bad reputation, and I like your shortcut to explain this.
I would like to introduce another perspective on consciousness discussion, actually, because in my mind we have at least two very different ways of understanding what's the basic nature of psychotherapy in the room. At least that's how I say it. One perspective would say the essence of psychotherapy is what's happening in the relationship, in the contact, in the emotional connection between the therapist and the patient. What's happening there, that's the essence of psychotherapy. And another understanding that's somewhat different is we need specific techniques to treat specific disorders. That's another way of understanding the essence of psychotherapy. And which one of these we choose, it's not an either or, but it's a question of balance. But I would say I'm more to the way of thinking like the essence of psychotherapy is the way I'm with my patient. It's the way that I'm thinking with my patient. It's not me thinking, it's us thinking. It's a dialogue. It's an ongoing dialogue. And it's not a technique. I would say that's more important than me having specific techniques. Although I do have techniques, but mostly it's secondary. If I choose one or the other technique, it's the way I'm here. That's the most important thing for me.
You can have a certain, in your relationship when you are talking, thinking with your patient, you have from a professional viewpoint, you can emphasize different things.
That's true.
And that's not a technique.
No.
That's a knowledge.
Yeah, and it's also a way of being in the room, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's more related to you as a person. Of course, you're a professional person, but you're also present as Hanne.
Yes.
And when I'm doing therapy, I'm present as me.
Yes.
Mostly. Most of me is there, at least. Some parts can't be there.
I think a lot of people would say that that's a prerequisite kind of for having psychotherapy, but I think like it's up for debate, I guess, in the literature where the healing happens, right? Is it in my interaction with you, or is that the foundation for me being introduced to certain things that I should or should not do? And I think that this discussion between the relationship I have with my client and this technique, it's very often depicted as either I'm sitting there and I'm being empathetic, I'm validating, I'm in good contact, or in opposite to that, I am a robot that prescribes strategies and use techniques without really having like a basis for doing so. And I think that's like a tiny bit polarizing of what is going on. I think that from my perspective, and I think I've changed somewhat on this, that when this is like a few years ago, I think I was very much like in favor of randomized controlled trials and making sure that we prescribe certain therapies to certain diagnoses. And I think what I'm more interested in now is this like the dynamics as they unfold in the situation. And whether you as a therapist adhere to the idea that you're prescribing a technique or a strategy, I think you're very much doing so just without putting words to it. Because when the way you are with your client, then you make sure that you share an understanding, that you have like a working distance to whatever is being said. I would say that's attention regulation. It's just not like a strategy that you pick up off your toolbox and use. But, yeah.
So you have to do process studies.
But that's exactly what Greenberg and his friends did a lot of that.
I would like to tell a short story about once a client asked me, and it was very heavy work with me, and then at some point she asked me, are you Søren or are you a coach when you talk to me? And then I said, in the moment I said, oh, I'm Søren, and that means that I'm sort of with Carsten and Hanne and you all. And then I sent him a mail afterwards and said, there's one thing I do with you that I don't do normally or always. Whenever you say something which it is easy to say, I stop you. We have to act. I was thinking about when you had said this, then she tells another story about him. So if they sort of use a lot of time for telling things that they could tell anybody, I'll say, I think, well, I'll stop it. saying, I think it's, or I want to ask you this or something. So that was what was, and that was for me professionalism. That's where I was living. And we're not here to
When you tell long stories, you need more money.
Can I just add a little bit to your comments now, because well, first I would say that what you're doing is, at least to my mind, would be you will always have a psychotherapeutic stance or attitude towards what's happening in the room. And I try not to have that when I'm with other people. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult. My daughter sometimes says to me, oh, now you're being a therapist again, and then I have to shut up, you know? So that was one thing. And the other thing is, I also started to think about that when you said it, Hanne, about this woman, Gerda, you call her, yeah? She was talking a lot. And you would just let her talk. Wouldn't you sometimes, well, I'm being a little bit rhetorical now, because that's what I would do. I would verbalize that I notice this pattern. And how should we understand that?
I would tell her how it influenced me.
Okay, okay.
I wouldn't say like, I'm bored now. No, but I would say, I've heard this story before, you're repeating yourself, and it's really not, I'm interested in this or this.
So
there are many ways of stopping her, and if she continues, I could say shut up.
Because I wouldn't do
It
that.
depends on our relationship.
Because I would change the focus from
Yeah.
her boring story to maybe my reaction to her being boring or me being bored, or
Yeah.
how should you understand this pattern? And do you recognize this
Yes.
from other situations in your life, which you definitely would?
Now I understand what you're saying. When he keeps telling, if you take this Gerda, he
Yeah.
kept telling stories every time I've asked her what I would say are important, if I responded to her and understood what she was saying to me.
Yeah.
And she kept changing the subject. I might say you're now changing the subject. It's like you're not hearing that I really heard you before. And that will stop her.
Yes.
I would like to hear, how would you approach a person like
Me?
Gerda? Yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, I would think that I would be interested in the question whether this was a reaction to her initial emotional reaction. So I could get the hypothesis that there's a sadness there, there's an anxiety, there's something there that she's not facing, maybe like a grieving, that she's no longer has that relationship with her mom that she used to have, or something like that. And then I would see this storytelling as a way of reacting to that emotional response. We call it reactive responding. You can react to your emotions in your thoughts, in your behavior, and with other emotions. And so I would be interested in the functionality of those storytelling.
But
And
as Hanne would, I
maybe.
think. Yeah, just to draw one parallel, the functionality of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
I would be
think
very
that Hanne would
explicit
do that
in asking, you know, like did it start with an anxiety? Maybe not in those like exact words, you know, but be interested in the primary, the initial emotional response, because that would be reflective of the activated need.
But the focus is somewhat different, if I understand it correctly. Because one thing is to focus on the functionality for the individual person here and now. What are you regulating by telling this boring story once again?
Right.
Yeah.
And so my idea would be that it's some sort of emotional avoidance. If you then land at the answer that you're avoiding anxiety, then you can see what does that point to. That can involve her, and it can involve a relationship.
Yeah. Because I would be prepared to understand it differently. Like the function could be to keep me at a distance. So it could be something happening between us, not Gerda regulating herself, but regulating the distance between us, or our relationship.
Yeah.
She didn't have to hear what was really happening.
Yeah.
And avoidance.
And that would be something.
And I think, you know, like
slightly
we distinguish between intrinsic emotional regulation and extrinsic emotional regulation. But I think I would I would still put my money on the fact that she was regulating extrinsically you. Still this like underlying, there's a hurt there that I have a hard time connecting with, and that's what the therapeutic work should kind of take place.
From a quite another perspective, I would use the QUACS model, the competence model, and I would simply ask her that now that she's telling me this story, where would she locate something going on, and invite her to reflect on what she's actually doing. It could be that she's trying to keep distance to me, it could be that she's handling something else, but I don't know, and I would invite her to investigate the position in which she was attuned in some of these dimensions that she would actually recognize as meaning something in the situation. So that would be, I think, another way out. A new way. I haven't done it. I will do it. Can you send her to me?
Get ready to be bombarded with models.
Yeah, James?
I think you were first, actually.
That's okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a comment or so on the therapeutic alliance. You've been talking about how the therapist is present with the client. I'm also thinking that the client has a different norm set available in that setting, because I often have clients that say, it's so nice to talk to you because you're not my mother, you're not my wife, you're not my daughter. It's just different. I can be more open because I don't have those role expectations that she has for a long time. So I'm just thinking also your question before, that the client also has a different set of behaviors maybe available in that setting. Does that make any sense?
No.
Yes, no.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think you're right, that his expectations, he feels free, and just like you say, it's not my mother, now I can be open. On the other hand, I'm sure she can't help doing what she always is doing. She will show herself, maybe in a different way with the therapist, but she will show who her way in somehow the same. This is my, I don't know what to say. You don't change when you go into the therapy room. You might feel safe, I hope so. That'll be nice. Or you feel more tense, but you keep, for instance, if you talk about this avoidance behavior, she will do the same with me. She might do it in a different way than she do it with her mother, but she will keep being avoiding to relate to the painful underlying issue as long as she don't feel really safe enough or understand that I have heard her, how she avoids. So I think the same thing will happen to me in a different way. This is why therapy is fantastic, because the patient will always come in and do the same thing. Otherwise, there'll be no use for therapy.
But the way I understand what you're saying is that the patient is trying to tell you about her hope that you will help her. But at the same time, I would say she will always be prepared to see you as a copy of a person from her past in the transference, or she will activate her object relations. You can use a lot of different words for this, but it will repeat itself somehow, even though on the more conscious level, she might think you're a different person. And she's right. You're a new object and an old object at the same time, and that's important. Because it opens for correctional emotional experiences in the relationship.
Yeah.
So, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I also think it's the difference between being Charlotte or therapist, because I'm not being private.
No.
So it is a different dynamic in that setting. So it's also sort of a different relationship, even though there will be some reenactment of all these other
When you talk about Gerda, I won't respond like her mother.
No.
She will expect me to somehow, and I won't, and that's probably the changing point too. She will get another feedback from me than she's used to.
I would really like if you would address the issue of the value of research in terms of psychotherapy.
I hate it.
I would guess that, yeah.
Can you make your question?
Yeah, I'm thinking that there's been the discussion, especially in Gestalt therapy throughout all the years, about the value of a theoretical overstructure and a way of understanding the dynamics in psychotherapy. That's it's been seen historically as something that could get in the way of the kind of contact that you talk about, Hannah. And it seems at the same time that that's part of why Gestalt therapy has been excluded from academia generally. And so I'm curious. Now this is Integrativ Gestalt Practice that is sponsoring this, and so Gestalt is part of this title. And historically, there's been this tension, and so that's the underlying interest that I have, and it seems like you guys represent different aspects to that issue.
I think that the bad reputation of Gestalt has helped to tell that this is not a scientific thing. I mean, but Gestalt comes also from Gestalt psychology, which is scientific and below. And but that's interesting that it's forgotten at university. I don't think you have any Gestalt psychology aspects in.
I've become the coordinator of clinical psychology, so soon we will.
Gestalt psychology is in cognitive psychology.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I don't know what they are doing now, if it's still there, but it used to be there. It's something that we read about when I was a student. It was there. It's down prioritized, I think, but yeah. But as to the question of how to consider research in therapy, therapeutic research, I think that we shall always listen to what and be curious about what kind of new knowledge can we discover in different ways. And when, for instance, you talked about that too, Nia, when you discover something about how an emotion develops and how it matters if you do something here or there, then this is a very valuable knowledge. We shall always know that it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be exactly this thing for this specific person, but we do know some general things about it. So we should incorporate this knowledge and use it as a way of thinking about what strategies then could be good to use. Some strategies might have been investigated. So we know probably that there are strategies and techniques we can use here because they have been investigated. But here comes the danger.
Yeah.
And when this becomes political or in academia becomes a way of valuing who are doing the right thing and who are doing the wrong thing, then the research in methods, specific methods to specific diagnosis, becomes, in my view, a danger. Because then you exclude all the other ways in which you haven't tried it out yet in the same way, so it hasn't been shown how the effects will be by working with other methods. So the problem for me is to say that when the methods become specified in a way so that you are obliged to use this method for this specific diagnosis, then we have a problem. But being more knowledgeable about what is going on, how could the mechanisms be, what does it matter if it is this and that in this process of development of emotional pathology in different ways, it's valuable.
And can I just add that I 100% agree. I think that it's extremely problematic that, you know, if you take the stance that you can't say that something is efficacious until there's a number of randomized controlled trials showing that it's efficacious. I think it's as problematic to say that, well, then we don't know anything, so then we just do what I like. You know, somewhere in between is probably a good place to be. I also think that this like comparison of different therapies is close to ridiculous. I know that the American NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, they don't fund these horse races anymore because like a lot of therapy works, and we know like generally we have ideas why, but we don't know the specific mechanisms. So when we have these horse races, the question then is, do I with my therapy move these exact mechanisms that I in a competing therapy do not move? And if that's the case, then at least my kind of theoretical model like holds up, you know, to an empirical test. But then it's secondary who benefits most. So this, like taking a step back and knowing why our therapies work the ways they do, I think it's a more solid approach. I think it was premature to say this therapy should be given to this person, this therapy should be given to this. But if we understand those more fundamental questions, then I think we'll be better at prescribing. And then the question comes, what should we be prescribing therapy for? And there's a movement, instead of, no Americans like the DSM-5, and I think a lot of us agree that it's problematic in many ways. But they have started to diagnose a little bit differently. So now they're following people over, let's say, 4 weeks, and then they are trying to look at the complex pattern that a certain individual's symptoms are, you know, are forming. So we've had the idea for a long time that anxiety and depression go hand in hand. It's kind of like negative affect. But when you follow individual people over time, you realize that sometimes people are anxious and then they're never depressed, and the other way around, sometimes it goes hand in hand. So this kind of like diagnosing, if you want to call it that, at a much more individual level. So you don't do it on means, so the variation becomes meaningful and so forth. This is long, you know, like I like to talk more about that. But I think those approaches hold more promise from my otherwise quantitative, very much research pro kind of position.
Yeah, I think we have to finish in a few minutes, actually.
So there's a question there.
Okay.
I was inspired of your talking about what actually works in psychotherapy. What does a therapy good so that the client walks out the door and felt helped in some way to manage his or her life in a way? And then the studies of like emotional self-regulation and other studies, how does that impact with all the studies of non-specific factors in therapy and stuff like that? So I'm not sure what I'm asking you about, but I just think that there's something here. How do you impact different studies of what you do here together with studies of effect of therapy?
I don't know, maybe it's an old study that says that it's not the kind of therapy they do, it's the therapist. As in the oldest therapist. No, isn't it true that they have come up with an inquiry of a lot of therapists and clients, and shows out that it was not what kind of therapy they were doing, it was the most experienced therapists who had the best results.
And then the question is that because they're very like talented at a specific method that they were formed when we didn't have a gazillion psychotherapies available that we could draw from? You know, like do you simply become better at certain things when you don't have that like large of a catalog to choose? You know, I don't know.
I would just like to add just one little thing about this. I would say that at least a third of my latest book is concerned with this question: what does working practice? So I could talk about this a long time.
Or you could buy the book.
Or you could buy the book. I'll just leave it there, actually, because it's not that experience in itself guarantees better results. It's more difficult or more complicated than that, actually. But long story.
Okay, last question.
Yes, well, I think that experience, could it be many things? It could be age, it could be many therapies, and it could be knowledge from experience, both moving at the university or knowledge about modern life use. Yeah, that's all together I call experience, and like you said, everyone has their own style, and someone takes more experience from doing therapies, and some take more experience from knowledge from research.
An interesting...
Not to put it all in all is very good, it's...
No, but they haven't, what I mean is that they, as far as I know, they haven't found out what kind of therapy is working best.
No, I agree about that, but I think...
They're equal.
Yeah.
The outcome is equal.
Okay.
All is equal.
As long as the therapist is just somewhat competent. But an interesting place to look.
Could be many things.
Yeah.
Depends also about yourself, whether you get the competence.
But I think you could say it's not the experience in itself, it's what you do with it. It's the way in which you transform yourself by having different experiences.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you can learn from many different things. And then we do have specific settings where they do a specific training that sort of pave the way for a possibility that you would now have this kind of experience that you can do something with, which might make you a better psychotherapist. But other people might read novels, they go fishing, do things and discover something, look at the tree, take them in, do things with the experiences.
But we also have studies showing that some therapists are becoming worse by having training because they're becoming more active in the therapeutic room, and the way they're being active is destructive. So, but an interesting place to look is
in your new book.
It's looking at master therapists. Actually, they're doing that in Norway and in America, looking at what is these master therapists actually doing. But long story.
Yeah. Is that it? Jeg vil gerne bare sige tusind tak til alle sammen, alle jer, der har holdt ud. Det har været en rigtig lang dag, det har været en spændende indlæg, oplæg, foredrag, som har i den grad repræsenteret forskellige delperspektiver på den større helhed, og det er jo det, som er noget af vores intention i det her IGP-netværk. Jeg synes, det har været en fed dag.
Tak for en god dag.
Tak for det.